At situation, hold on.
We are live.
All right, thank you. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. This is the September 23rd Charter Review. We have Cliff Shepard ready to go through our next grouping of sections, which I believe is 46 through 51. And so I'll turn it over to Cliff to take it away.
All right, guys, I'm going to share the screen now and put up the memo. Share. Okay, is everybody good? We can see it, and by nod of heads. Okay, so the first section, and you know, this actually, the point I'm about to make was made at another. I'm doing charter reviews now for two other cities. One is Ponce Inlet, the other is Maitland, and this was brought up at Ponce Inlet in their first session, which is our memo say areas for discussion and staff or council and none. What they should say, to be more correct, is legal areas for discussion, things which I might have a concern about legally. That does not mean, and I assume you guys all certainly know this by now, that there may not be concerns that you have that are based on policy or the politics of the area or whatever. And you're not going to see me raising any of those. As I said to the group last night, I raise stuff that is based on actual experience that I've seen where problems can occur or legal issues that I'm aware of. But so the fact that I say none, and that's why I'm going to go there, you'll see I say powers of taxation and I have none. If you have some, I'm not trying to squelch your conversation or discussions. And I think you all know that, but I wanted to repeat it since it was asked of me the other night. And I thought, well, maybe I should make sure you guys are aware of that. But with that said, the first section, 46 for tonight, neither staff nor I had any comments or concerns about that. So if anybody does, then let me know, raise hand, and we will discuss it. Okay. I'm not seeing anything, or are you? Okay.
No hands raised.
All right. Let me get my thing going here. All right, and the same was true of 747, which is remedies for enforcing obligations due to the city. There were no recommended changes here. I don't see any hands. Okay. All right, now the next section, there were not concerns, that's the wrong way to put it, but there were, let me change this view so I can get to where I need to be. All right, now was a section where the staff had some changes to try to basically be consistent with state law. And those are spelled out here. Instead of grading businesses and fixing over fees, which we used to call them occupational licenses, we don't do that anymore. We call them business tax receipts. So this is the power to classify the business and then levy license and occupation taxes, which is allowed. We don't license the businesses as it was called an occupational license, meaning we don't say that a hair cutter is qualified to be a hair cutter or a bar has a liquor license, so to speak. And so based on the misnomer, that law changed quite a bit ago. And your charter is now being suggested to be updated to fit what is the current circumstances. Or anybody got any questions or concerns about that? Okay, I'm seeing none. All right, so
we do have one hand raised.
Okay, yes, I see it. Sandy, go ahead.
Yeah, so you said we don't license, but in the section title, it says power to classify and levy license.
License and occupation taxes. And I honestly, you know, I would have to, that specific change in the title came through staff, and so they might have an explanation. I mean, their memo is attached, but I don't recall an explanation for that. But if you look in the body of the thing, they actually strike the word license and talk about local business taxes, which is what all the cities do. They do business tax receipts.
So my question would be, is the word license necessary then?
To me, the answer to that is no. To classify and levy business and occupational taxes or something would be more accurate from my perspective, but this was not a suggestion from me. So I do not know if there's a reason from staff perspective why it was left in there, but taken out of the body. And I don't know if there's anybody in staff who's on the call who can speak to that. I just don't know. Mike, do you?
Yeah, we've got both Ashley and the city clerk, Sherry, on the line. I'm not sure if either of you want to take a stab at that.
Mike, I may have just missed the title because we do not refer to them as occupational or licensing anymore, so we can have it match the body.
Okay, I'm going to change it then, and here's what I will change it to. It'll say power to classify and levy business and occupation taxes, which I think is consistent with what is actually done. Okay, does everybody have a okay with that?
Yeah, Cliff, on the notes
sir.
from Sherry, it says power to classify and levy local business taxes. I'm fine with what you said. Just make a note that the city clerk did change the title in her memo.
Let me find that. I don't know how I would have missed it, but it's certainly possible I did. Yeah, I see that. I don't know whether I got. Let me see if there's somewhere else. Power to change business tax forms. Yeah, I see that. Okay, my bad. And thank you for seeing that. So it'll be corrected, and we're good. All right. So now on section 48. Unless is there any more hands? I don't see them all. Okay. Let's see. We are section 49. Liens are negotiable. And then these changes, which are suggested here, were obsolete language or clarification of intent. And let me explain that to the extent it needs explaining. We don't use, the city doesn't use, nobody does, as far as I know, an improvement lien book in accordance with charter and ordinances anymore. And so that's just not how liens that are held by the city for non-payment of whatever are handled. So that's why that was stricken. The other changes were made for clarification of language by virtue of splitting up a longer sentence. If you see where I changed the charter, I think it's the second sentence, to make it 2 sentences as opposed to 1 long run-on sentence. And I also tried to clarify what I believe to be the intent here. This section maybe is superfluous, and I say that because when you're a city that has all home rule powers and authority that's not otherwise restricted from you by general or special law, that would include the power to negotiate liens, enter into contracts, put out things to bid, and so forth and so on. So in large part, you can make the argument that this section is superfluous. You already have these authorities. But if you're going to leave it in order to not cause the masses to be concerned that you're making wholesale changes that they don't grasp, this is to be more consistent with what I think is the intent. So it says that all liens held by Jacksonville Beach against land and property shall be negotiable and assignable, may be transferred and sold by the city council by ordinance, and as opposed to as it was written before, it sounded like it was limited to only for security for the redemption and payment of serial improvement bonds, which I don't think is the intent, and certainly is too limiting. To change it to and may also be used as security for redemption and payment. So those things are now not linked together as a concept, and the reason is to give you as the city more power if you need it, which again, arguably you don't. You already have all the power you need under home rule. But that's why I clarified that language, or at least think that that's a recommendation for you to consider. The other change was just to avoid the redundancy of saying any and all, because all covers any and all. And that was it. So that's the reason for those changes. Are there questions? Does anybody have a hand up? Okay. All right, on to the next section. 50 specific powers. Now, again, you could argue that everything in here is a power that you already have. So there could be an argument be made that you don't need any of that, right? Because you have all powers under home rule that are not preempted from you by general or special law. But again, to the point, if you're going to take to the voters and say, we're striking out all this stuff, the average voter is going to go, what are you doing? And not really, I mean, if they've ever heard the term home rule, they probably don't understand what it means. I was in law school before I understood, and even after law school, because I wasn't a local government lawyer right away, I didn't fully understand the concept. It's very simple when you do understand it, but not everybody does. And so that is why I didn't suggest any changes here. However, I did want to point out that there's this section at the end that is a reminder to us that we have not only this issue, which is about the liquor licenses issue, but we have other issues that are still in the parking lot. And Mike and I had a discussion prior to this meeting about when we might get back to those matters, and that whether that'll be at the last meeting or something. I just wanted to make the reminder to you all that there are several issues, among them the liquor license, census issue, so forth, that are still in the parking lot. And at some point, we'll need to figure out what we want to do with those. So are there any comments or concerns? I see Mr. Nichols has his hand up.
Yeah, I just had a couple questions about, I know we're going to get back around to it, and I do want to talk about the liquor license a little bit more and maybe have staff do a little more research on, obviously it's set based off of the 1950 census, and we probably have about 4 times as many people now, and I don't know if the intent at that time was to keep it based off of that census, or they just put it in there and it was supposed to change. But I just would like to see what the staff's opinion and your opinion would be if we just got rid of that section of it and created a maximum just based off of 550 or whatever the maximum is. And then I guess we'd have to go back to the land development code to kind of specify where they can go. And I just really want to do more of a deep dive into that, just to find out, I don't know if we necessarily need more, but I think that there is definitely the perception of there being a monopoly on those licenses, and it seems a little odd that you can get one for about $150,000 in Duval County and they're running $750 out here at the beach. So I would just really like to take more of a deep dive into that at some point in time and talk about the parking as well. And just wanted your thoughts on, on changing that and how it would impact our city. I mean, I don't necessarily want to promote more drinking, just if it was diluted more, it might work. And just wanted your thoughts on it.
Well, I will speak from the legal perspective, and it is probably going to be a frustrating answer, so prepare yourself. It is really sort of outside the role of the counselor to a charter review commission of any kind to delve into the issue of policy. And the reason I go there first is because how many liquor licenses you allow or don't allow is not a legal matter, and it won't be a legal matter unless someone challenges it for some reason that's based on a discriminatory issue. And it wouldn't be necessarily, when you base it on a census, even an older census, you could argue, the argument could be made that it's out of date, but it's not because you're choosing one population to have licenses versus another. It's a number. And you could have easily said the maximum number of licenses will be X, whatever that is. And if X is now 75 years old, well, okay, it is, so what? You can choose to update X or not update X. So the fact that it's tied to a census gives you a number because you can do the math equation, but it could have been as simple as saying, well, we won't allow more than 50 licenses in the city, or 25 or 15. And so that is the legal question. In terms of the policy ramifications, I think those are best left to the staff and the politicians, but obviously just to kind of set the parameters on both sides, there will be people who will favor more licenses as a pro-business kind of a stance and to promote more kinds of businesses, whether it be restaurants, bars, entertainment establishments. And there will be those that say, nope, we got enough. We want it for locals. We don't want all these people coming in from out of town or from other places. We don't want to be their entertainment mecca. We want them to stay home. And I've seen both. And because we represent a number of beach communities. So that's kind of the way it'll break down in my experience. But at the end of the day, it's for y'all to decide what works for you all.
Great. I just think that we need to have that conversation as a city, as the council and staff and kind of, see what any changes would make and what it would look like and how it would impact everything.
Now, I see two hands, but I don't know who was up first. Mike, can you help me? Was it Mr. Meza or Mr. Stokes?
Chet Stokes first, followed by Fernando.
Okay, thank you. Chet?
Cliff, my only concern at the moment is that we have it in two sections. We have it in section 2, which was I think one of our very first meetings.
It was, and that's when we came up with the parking lot.
Yeah, and then we have it also in section 50. So my just question to you is, should we just have it in one section? Because having it in two, I don't personally I don't understand why it's in two sections. So to me, it just seems like, we should pick whether it needs to be in section 2 or whether it should be in section 50 and strike the language from one of the sections. Because having it in two sections to me is like you said earlier, I love the word superfluous. So
yeah, well, we have a different phrase for it in the law also called belt and suspenders, but you really only need one or the other. You don't need both. Again, though, I will tell you, this is in the realm of the politics more than the legal. I have seen citizens go absolutely batty, even though something's in there more than one time on an issue that they care about, i.e., for example, height restrictions, and you try to take it out of one space, and for some reason, the mind immediately goes to what are they up to? What are they trying to do? This is important. That's why we said it twice. We meant it, and so forth. So that's a political discussion, but as a legal matter, once is plenty. Mr. Meza.
Yes, mostly a comment. I do want to agree with Vice Mayor Corey Nichols on the amount of licenses. I think this is something that us as city government and city staff should discuss as to if we want more licenses. Do we want 2 more? Do we want 10 more? That is something that I think we're going to have to discuss down in the future and make sure that we don't destroy our way of life here by adding 20,000 licenses and et cetera, et cetera. That's just a comment that I wanted to make.
Well, I'm looking forward to that discussion. I'm sure it'll have some interesting participation. But I don't see anybody. Are there any changes? Mike, I see your hand.
Yeah, and this is maybe more of just a housekeeping question for you, Cliff. And it's a 2-part question. The first is it typical to see the liquor license numbers addressed within a city charter?
Not at all.
Not at all. And then the second is, for those that do have it in there, is it typical to see it where it's formula based, such as we see, or is it usually just a hard number? The number of licenses shall be no more than X.
I believe in admitting what you don't know, and this is not a provision I've ever seen in any other charter anywhere, period. And so I can't say whether it's usually a formula based or whether it is a number. I would guess that to the extent it exists in other places, there's some sort of a formula as opposed to just somebody picking a random number, because one of the things that you want when you're drafting legislation of any kind, including charter legislation, is a rational basis for that. And I think it would be much easier to say, forgetting the 1950 census for a moment and just talking about a number, that a certain number of licenses per population, there could be a rational basis for that, as there's more than enough to serve our population with these numbers, and you might even be able to find an expert to come up with a formula for that. So my suspicion is that the extent it may exist in other places, formula would have been certainly what I would have recommended, because somebody can challenge a rule or a law as being arbitrary and capricious if it's not based on something that is quantifiable. And so while it could have easily said 30 licenses, 50 or whatever, if someone were to challenge, well, what do you base that on? Well, that just seemed like a good number for us. Well, who's your expert on alcohol beverages? Nobody. What? Well, we are a dry community. Oh, well, okay, that's different. But now you're not a dry community. You're just saying we want 10. Well, where'd you come up with 10? And so that is my suspicion, but I do not know. I've never seen a provision like this in any other charter.
Thank you, Cliff. And we do have a couple more hands raised. We have Councilor Golding, followed by Councilor Jansen.
Yes, ma'am.
So to Mike's question, I can honestly say that I had conversations with Mayor Flan Sharp, and he had said he had spoken very specifically about this, that this was in the charter because the citizens wanted to limit the number of liquor licenses that we have in Jack's Beach. And if it's not in the charter, it can be changed by any city council. By putting it in the charter, it can only be changed by a vote of the people. And so the reason it's there is because they wanted it to have to be changed by a vote of the people. So,
and again, my assumption is that the 1950 population of Jack's Beach might have a different view than the 2021 population. But to your point, until you have a vote, you don't really know. Mr. Jansen.
Yeah, so if it's not in the charter, where would it reside?
Well, it wouldn't. There would be essentially, you apply for a license and your limitations are, is there a place where you can get a license and run a business based on zoning restrictions that would include sales of alcohol? And that's where it is in most places. There might be districts, for example, like, or within so many feet of a church you can't operate, or a school, those kinds of restrictions, but it's not by virtue of a not beyond this arbitrary cap of a number. That's the way it is, I think, in most places, and certainly the other places we represent. So it's a zoning issue, not a numbers game. It's well, here's the area where you can have liquor establishments. And if you buy one and you don't happen to sell liquor, well, okay. But if you happen to sell liquor and you can get a license, then you can do that.
Our Planning and Development Director, Heather Ireland, has also indicated that this language or similar language is also in section 4.1 of our code, just as an FYI.
Which is a further indication that they really wanted it. But again, you look at the time then and now, and I don't know if it'd be a different result today.
Is it the same language or is it in conflict of?
Heather,
It would have to
want
be
to
the
chime in
same.
on that?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, it is the exact same language.
And we have Councilor Dumont with her hand raised as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Something it's more detailed, but this is specifically for bar licenses. We don't have a restriction on restaurants that serve alcohol. And I think that is something that we have to think about. Obviously, if it's in the in the LDC as well as the charter, strictly bar licenses, all you have to do is get one of these licenses and you can just sell as much alcohol as you want and not need to have food, is a very different establishment than one that we are, according to our strategic plan, we are trying to promote more food establishments that also serve alcohol. So, and I know Cliff's other clients don't necessarily have that distinction within so when he's talking about liquor and liquor sales, he's talking about all liquor sales. And here we are specifically talking about one type of license.
I definitely understand that, and it's an important distinction. But I would also suggest to you, at least I believe, because I think I went through this whole exercise at the beginning of the pandemic, because there were so many different rules coming out of the governor's office about who could sell liquor and what way they could sell liquor, and could they sell liquor to go if they weren't a liquor store, but they were a restaurant, but people were coming to them to buy a bottle of wine to take with their meal and that sort of stuff. So my recollection is that the key distinguishing factor between a bar and a restaurant bar is not that they don't sell food at all, but the percentage of food to alcohol sales monetarily. And so you could have a situation that something that you would think is a restaurant, if you look at their receipts, is a bar. So a sports bar, somewhere where they sell food like munchies and potato skins and things of that nature. But if you look at the dollars and cents, the money's made on the alcohol by more than 50%, and that triggers that it's a bar. So again, it's a bigger question than, oh, these are just places that sell liquor and not food, because some of them do sell food along the lines of what I discussed.
But aren't these licenses pretty consistent throughout the state of Florida? that you have the SRX and you have the COP 4s and 2s, and aren't those consistent throughout Florida?
Yeah, there, in terms of how you define what category you're in, yes, the answer is yes, it's state law.
Okay. Yeah, I don't necessarily think we necessarily need more more bars, but I also in how the number came about and the ownership of them, it seemed to create a monopoly situation and create an unfair situation for other people that may have wanted them at the time. And I'm open to looking at how that would impact our city, so we can make get the information necessary to make a logical decision on how we want to go forward with that. And I think there's also the possibility, if you have more, that would reduce. I don't know if it would definitely bring a lot more people here, as opposed to dilute the number of the super crowded bars you have.
It really is it's an interesting debate. I'll give you an example of something for you to consider. And I'm not saying this would or wouldn't ever be something that's on the table at Jack's Beach, but as an example of a kind of an establishment. My son is a full-time musician, and he works at a place called Howl at the Moon. I don't know whether you've heard of it, but it is a place that occasionally they'll have an hors d'oeuvre line for a happy hour, but by and large, they sell alcohol, and you tip piano players and other musicians who play all kinds of music all night long. And so 100% it would qualify as a bar, because it doesn't sell food. Even the food that it provides a happy hour is for free. You pay the cover charge to get in to hear the entertainment. You buy way overpriced drinks, and then you listen to entertainment. And if you're there on the right night, you might get some nachos and cheese and whatever else is in the bar. But the point is, that kind of establishment, which most people would think of as a music venue, is by all definition a bar. So do you want one more? I don't know.
Right, but our SRX or our special license, to be a restaurant that serves alcohol, you're supposed to serve 50% of your income is supposed to come from food. So, I think that's a little bit of a different situation. And I think, it's enforced differently throughout the state. But I was just saying, I think it's just an item that we need to discuss. I don't know if this is necessarily the right time for it, but I mean,
this was just a reminder and a placeholder that we still have other issues that we got to get back to at some point. Mr. Mott.
Thank you. When we get to that discussion, which is definitely not tonight, we don't have staff input or anything else, no research. When was this passed? Was it passed in the 1950s, or was it passed later on that for some reason chose 1950 census? So I'd like a little bit more history on when this went in front of the citizens to get this outcome.
I could look that up as we're sitting here, but if I do, I'm gonna have to go pull up another screen and stick it in front of you while I do the research for Municode. But Municode will have on it the date of the charter as to when it was passed and adopted, and I just don't happen to know that off the top of my head. My suspicion is probably around 1950, but I don't know. I don't know who was next. Was it Miss Ireland, Mr. Mesa, or Miss Golding?
I'm guessing Heather Ireland is going to answer a question that's been posed. So why don't we let her go first, followed by Councilor Golding and then Councilor Mesa.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike. Just a quick answer. I looked at Municode and it was from 1955, that portion.
Okay. So the most recent census at the time. All right, Ms. Golding.
That's all I was going to say, because that it was in the 50s. Mayor Flan Sharp had said that it was passed back then.
Councilor Mesa.
Yes, question, and this is food for thought, and maybe I'm assuming this is going to be a discussion for later on, since we're talking about bars and restaurants. I know if you have a bar, you have a kitchen, you cannot sell more than 10 or 15% food, according to the state of Florida, something like that. Second, I know we were talking about rhinos last week or the other week. I know we were talking about the after hours permit, and in it said future restaurants will not be able to seek the after hours permit. Is it something that can be added into the charter, or is it something that could be done just in the city ordinance?
A further restriction on alcohol sales? Is that?
Yeah, so right now, restaurants and bars have to apply for after-hours permit to serve
Mhm.
alcohol past midnight. Obviously, the bars are going to apply for that. Some restaurants have that, but in the past, we've had problems with restaurant in name only, where they close the kitchen down, they still booze, and they turn into a nightclub or into a bar.
Right.
Is it something that could be added into the charter, or is it just needs to stay in the city
Well,
ordinance?
the answer is you can add that kind of a language in the charter if that's what you choose. But as I think I might have cautioned early on, one of the things that is important for this body and any charter review body to keep in mind is what is more appropriate as an ordinance and what is more appropriate as a charter. And the more strongly that your general population feels about it and not changing it, the charter is more likely place for it. But you should be aware of the fact that times change. And the reason I say that is because something that seems to be, at least in most of the communities that we have that deal with high rises, and that includes some that are in the center of the state as well as those that are on the coast. If you start trying to take height restrictions out of the charter, if they have them, you're going to get an uproar. That people do not want tall buildings at the beach, and if they're already there, they don't want any more. That is essentially true in all of the cities that we represent that are beach communities. So it's in the charter in those cities, 35 feet, no more. And they're trying to rein in some future high rise from what has already been present. There are some, for example, high rises, things that would qualify as high rises in Ponce Inlet. They don't want anymore. So you can put it in the charter. If that's something that you think that the voters feel really strongly about and are not likely to change their mind, at least not for a long time, then by all means. But if you can provide the same regulation by ordinance, but let it be adjustable or changeable or address changes in attitudes based on elections and council members who make decisions based on input from voters without having to go through the rigmarole and expense of a charter change, then that is probably preferable for most things having to do with usage of land and businesses and so forth. If it's essentially a zoning kind of an issue, it's better left to the code typically than to be placed in the charter. Ms. Ireland, your hand is still up. Does that mean you have another input for us?
No, sorry, I just forgot to put it.
Okay. So is there anything else or any other hands that I need to get to, Mike, that you see?
No, but I would just like to tell the council that maybe at an upcoming meeting, give this until next week to think about it a little bit. And at the next charter review on Monday, maybe you can provide us with your thoughts of what additional information you would need from staff in order to help you make a decision on this particular item.
When is our next charter review meeting, Mike?
I believe that's next Monday night, 5:30, and we'll be doing sections 52 and 53.
So I owe you a memo tomorrow.
Yes, you do.
Okay. Thank you for the reminder.
No
I looked
problem.
at my calendar and for some reason I didn't see it on there, and I don't know whether it's because it got omitted or whatever, but you'll have your memo. All right,
Okay.
So section 51.
One more question, Mike, can you give us a list of potential options for information that we could request in order to analyze the situation a little bit more, please? Thank you.
We can do that. FYI, Heather is out of the office tomorrow, and she's gone all weekend. So we may not be able to get that to you until sometime on Monday itself. Okay. But we'll try to send an email to council with a list of different things that we could provide to you that might assist in the decision-making process.
You don't make her work on weekends? No, I'm sorry, never mind.
Not on her birthday weekend, I don't.
Ooh, smart man.
Happy birthday. Okay, she can have this weekend off.
All right. All right, with consensus, we'll move on to section 51, additional powers. Again, I've stated this in the original section 50 regarding powers or special powers. Again, you have all powers that are permitted under state law that are not restricted or preempted by general or special law. And that is why I suggested, for clarification, literally for your voters more than you all, that the city shall have all powers permitted by state law, including but not limited to because the alternative is to strike the section in total and then try to spend a lot of explanation time as to why are you taking away the city's powers, which you're not doing. You're actually just recognizing that you already have them. So I think this is the easier road to hoe. But I'm certainly okay with, hey, strike the whole thing. If you want to do that, that's fine. From a staff perspective, if you're going to leave them in, there was a suggested change regarding the pier from amusement to recreational to be consistent with how it actually is used. And there were some other suggestions. I think there was a suggestion about section D, if I'm not mistaken. I got to go back here and look and see if there's anything more before I get there, regarding taxis and vehicles for hire, which we think of as Uber and Lyft and so forth. Those are preempted by state law, and that's why you see that section at the very end of section 51D strike through, and everything that references the ability of the state of us to license these things, which we do not have, also being stricken. So if you leave this provision in, or all of these sections in, it just takes out the stuff that is no longer, it's not just superfluous, it's no longer applicable or legal. And so that's what these changes are about. And that's what we tried to cover. And in terms of if someone wants to check where the preemptions come from, the statutes are cited there for you. I know you guys probably love to go, nothing better than to go read Florida statutes in your free time. So there are the citations if you want to look them up. But that's what it's for. Anybody had a hand or a question about any of this in section 51? I am not seeing any. Mike, are you? Well, with that, all right, with that, then I think we are done for tonight. And it is delightful to deal with a group that is so congenial.
Yeah, Cliff, I appreciate it. And while I've got the council on the line, I do need to just get a little bit of direction from them on an item. If you want to bug out, you can.
I will. Not that I don't love to eavesdrop, but I will let you have fun with that. So thank you so much. And I appreciate it, guys. I'll see you on Monday.
Thank you, Cliff. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, Cliff.
And forgot to bring it up at the council meeting the other night, but I forwarded an email to all of council from Lori Anderson over at Beaches Dial-A-Ride, or basically it's with regards to the repairs to their vehicles. There's currently not a process in place for them to continue using our garage for services beyond the dollar amount that we have allocated for them on an annual basis. The mayor and I actually ran into Lori last week at the Pablo Towers annual business meeting. And what she was really looking for is whether or not there's a process we can put in place whereby even once they go above the dollar amount, they can continue to use our garage for services, and then they pay for the overage for anything that goes beyond the annual allocation. I just wanted to make sure that you were all comfortable with proceeding in that fashion before we actually go ahead and do it. I think she had some concerns about having the majority of vehicle service performed at one location. And then when you get to the end of the year, having to bring it to a different location. And then if there's a problem after October 1, you're coming back to the city of Jacksonville Beach. She'd just like to keep it all in one location if possible. Do any of you have any heartburn with us proceeding in that fashion? All right, I think we have consensus on that. That's the direction I was looking for. And as Cliff said, we'll have a meeting on Monday night at 5:30, charter review. We'll be going over sections 52 and 53. And Heather and I will try to come up with some items that we think might assist you with the discussion of alcohol, and see if we can get that to you in advance of the meeting Monday night. With that being said, I think we're done for this evening. Everybody have a great rest of the evening and a great weekend with cooler, drier weather. And we'll see you on Monday.
See everyone.
Night, everyone.